She never planned to cross the line, but the line vanished before she realized. Claire Parker sat in her car outside a small cafe on a chilly November evening, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. Her phone screen glowed with a message that she had read at least a dozen times. "You deserve better." It was from Ethan Miller, her husband Daniel's best friend, the man who had slowly, quietly become the only person who seemed to see her anymore. She told herself it was innocent, just friendly messages, just someone who listened when her husband didn't. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. When does a conversation stop being harmless? It had started months ago. Ethan helping Daniel with a renovation project. He'd often stay for dinner. They'd talk while Daniel checked his emails or took work calls. Over time, those small talks turned into longer messages. Jokes, little confessions about bad days. Then, one night, when Daniel forgot their anniversary again, Ethan had been the one to call. His voice had been calm, soft. He told her she deserved to be happy. It wasn't flirting, not yet. It was something far more dangerous. Comfort. Now, sitting there in the cold, Claire stared through the cafe window. Ethan was already inside, waiting. A smile tugged at his lips when their eyes met. It was warm, familiar, and terrifying. She almost drove away. She almost listened to the tiny voice screaming that this was a mistake. But loneliness is heavier than guilt, and tonight, it pressed too hard on her chest. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The cafe door chimed as she entered. The smell of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. Ethan stood up immediately. "Hey, you came," he said, relief in his voice. Claire smiled weakly. "Yeah, I wasn't sure I would." They sat across from each other, the small table between them feeling both too wide and not wide enough. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass, soft and rhythmic, like a clock counting down to something neither of them wanted to face. Have you ever wanted to say something but knew once you did, everything would change? Ethan finally broke the silence. "You've seemed sad lately." Claire looked down at her cup. "I guess I just feel invisible sometimes." He leaned forward slightly. "Daniel doesn't mean to ignore you. He just gets caught up, you know." She nodded, her throat tight. "I know. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less." Their eyes met, and something shifted. A quiet, unspoken current passed between them, fragile but undeniable. She felt it, and she saw in his expression that he did too. She changed the subject quickly. They talked about small things, work, life, music. They laughed once, maybe twice, and for a few moments it felt almost normal again. But underneath every smile was something trembling and dangerous. When she reached for her coffee, her hand brushed his. It was barely a second, but her pulse jumped, betraying her. She pulled back, pretending not to notice, but her heart was already racing. Ethan didn't move. He just looked at her, eyes searching for something she wasn't ready to name. "You're shaking," he said softly. She laughed nervously. "It's cold." But it wasn't the cold. It was the sudden realization that she had crossed something invisible, not in action, but in emotion. What if a single look could rewrite everything you thought you were? Claire's mind flashed back to her wedding day. Daniel's smile, the vows, the feeling of certainty. But now that certainty felt distant, blurred. Daniel had been her home once. Lately, he just felt like someone she lived with. Ethan reached across the table, resting his hand gently on hers. His touch was careful, almost hesitant, but it broke whatever wall she had left. "You don't have to keep pretending you're okay," he whispered. Her breath caught. His voice was low, sincere, the kind of tone Daniel hadn't used in years. Her chest tightened. A warmth spread through her that scared her more than anything. She wanted to move her hand away, to stop this before it turned into something she couldn't undo. But she didn't. Because for the first time in so long, she felt something. Not loneliness, not emptiness. Something alive. Their eyes stayed, locked, and time felt slower. As if the world outside had paused, leaving only the sound of rain and two hearts beating too fast. Claire finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, this isn't right." He didn't argue. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her like someone who understood every thought she was too afraid to say. "I know," he said quietly. "But tell me it doesn't feel real." She wanted to lie, to tell him it didn't. But she couldn't. Because it did. It felt real in a way that scared her. Because it reminded her what love used to feel like. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the glass like a warning. She pulled her hand back, forcing herself to breathe. "We can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded, eyes heavy with something between regret and longing. "You're right." But neither of them stood up. Minutes passed in silence. Claire stared at the window, watching the blurred reflections of headlights on wet pavement. She could feel her heart breaking. Not because of what had happened, but because of what almost did. Sometimes the scariest part isn't falling. It's realizing you already started. When she finally stood, her chair scraped softly against the floor. "I should go," she whispered. Ethan stood too. "Claire." She froze at the sound of her name, the way he said it, soft and careful, like he was afraid to break it. He stepped closer, not touching her this time. Just standing near enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath, smell the faint scent of rain on his jacket. "You're not alone," he said quietly. She blinked back tears. "Don't say that, because if I believe you, I'll never leave." Ethan looked down, jaw tight, struggling between what he wanted and what was right. "Then maybe we should stop before we can't." She nodded quickly, biting her lip. "Yeah, we should." But as she walked past him, their arms brushed, barely, lightly, and the shock of it stopped her heart for a second. She didn't turn back. Couldn't. She pushed open the door, the cold night air biting her skin, and stepped into the rain. Her breath trembled as she reached her car. She gripped the steering wheel again, just as she had an hour ago. The cafe lights blurred through the rain on the windshield, and then her phone buzzed. A new message. It was from Ethan. "You forgot your scarf. Should I bring it to you?" Her fingers hovered over the screen, her mind screaming to drive away, but her heart whispered something else. She stared at the message, torn between the woman she was and the one she was becoming. And then, with one slow breath, she typed back, "Wait there." The rain fell harder, the world outside, growing dim. And inside her, the line she swore she'd never cross began to fade completely. What happens when comfort starts to feel like danger? Claire woke up the next morning trying to convince herself that last night meant nothing. Just a conversation. Just a touch. But her heart didn't listen. The memory of Ethan's voice, his eyes, the warmth of his hand. It played again and again, like a song she couldn't turn off. Daniel came home late that night, like always. He dropped his briefcase on the counter, loosened his tie, and asked, "You're still up?" She nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." He didn't notice the sadness in her voice. He just scrolled through his phone, half listening, half gone. How long can you live beside someone and still feel completely alone? Claire sat in silence, the ticking clock the only sound between them. She wanted to say something. Anything. but the words never came. When he finally went upstairs, she stared at the empty couch and whispered to no one, "I miss you." Her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "You were quiet last night. Did I make you uncomfortable?" She hesitated before typing back. "No, I just didn't expect to feel that much." Seconds later, his reply came. "Then don't fight it, Claire." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Don't fight it. But she should. She knew she should. All morning she tried to distract herself. Cleaning, laundry, work emails. But every time she picked up her phone, his name glowed back at her like a secret waiting to be told. By afternoon, she gave in. "Coffee?" she texted. Ethan's reply came almost instantly. "Same place?" Sometimes temptation doesn't whisper. It smiles. That evening, she found herself driving again. The same cafe, the same golden light spilling across the street. She told herself it was just to talk, just closure. Ethan was already there, sitting by the window. When he saw her, his expression softened. "Hey." She tried to sound casual. "Hey, yourself." They talked about safe things, work, weather, old movies. But it didn't feel safe. Every word hung heavy in the air, every silence filled with things unsaid. When she reached for her cup, their fingers brushed again. This time she didn't pull away, neither did he. Her heart was racing. She wanted to move, to say something, but her body stayed still. It wasn't desire that froze her. It was confusion, guilt, need, all tangled together. Ethan leaned closer, his voice low. "You don't have to pretend, Claire." Her breath trembled. "Pretend what?" "That you're happy." The words hit hard, because they were true. For a moment, everything around them faded. The hum of conversations, the clinking cups, the rain outside. It was just them, and the realization that something irreversible had begun. She stood up quickly. "I should go." Ethan reached out, not to stop her, just to steady her. His fingers brushed her wrist, warm, gentle, dangerous. Claire froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. For a single, fragile heartbeat, the world felt suspended. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, into the cold night. The air sharp against her skin, but as she reached her car, her phone buzzed again. A message. From Ethan. "You forgot your umbrella. Want me to bring it?" Her hands shook as she read the words. The rain poured harder, blurring the lights of the cafe behind her. She looked back once, and saw him still standing inside, watching her through the glass. And in that silent moment, she knew the storm hadn't even started yet. Sometimes the moment you feel alive is the one that ruins everything. Claire thought she could stop. She told herself the second meeting would be the last. But the heart doesn't follow logic. It follows what it's been starving for. And hers had been empty for too long. Days passed in a blur of messages and half-truths. Ethan's name lit up her phone more than Daniel's did. She told herself they were just friends, that it wasn't an affair if there were no lies. But deep down, she knew that secrecy was already a lie. How do you stop something that feels like the only thing keeping you alive? Daniel noticed the change before she could hide it. "You've been different lately," he said one night, eyes searching hers. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Just tired." But her heart was already miles away. Ethan had asked her to meet again. This time somewhere quiet, away from curious eyes. A lake outside town, a place where no one would know them. She told herself she wouldn't go, that she'd block his number, that she'd fix her marriage. But when dusk came, she found herself driving down that lonely road anyway. Ethan was waiting by the water, hands in his pockets, a soft smile on his face. The fading light painted everything in gold and gray. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either," she whispered. He handed her a coffee, just like old times. They talked about nothing important: weather, work, the noise of the city. But beneath every word was a silence filled with meaning. Then he said softly, "I can't keep pretending this means nothing." Claire froze. The words hit harder than she expected, because she had been pretending too. Pretending that it was innocent, pretending that it didn't matter. Her eyes filled before she could stop it. "Ethan, I never meant for this to happen." He stepped closer. "Neither did I, but maybe it was supposed to." His words made her heart ache. She wanted to believe him, that this was fate, not a mistake. But every time she thought of Daniel, guilt clawed its way back. I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. Ethan reached up, brushing away a tear. His touch was gentle, sincere, and in that brief moment she forgot everything: her marriage, her vows, her fears. For the first time in years, she felt seen. But then her phone buzzed. The sound shattered the silence like a warning bell. She glanced down. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Her breath caught. Her hands shook. Ethan looked at her, realization dawning in his eyes. "Claire, answer it." She didn't. The phone kept ringing, echoing across the still lake, and in that sound, she felt the weight of every choice pressing down on her. Ethan whispered, "You can't live between two hearts forever. You have to choose." Claire looked at him, her eyes full of tears, her phone still vibrating in her trembling hand. And in that fragile, breathless moment, she realized no matter what she chose, someone's heart would break. The hardest part isn't falling. It's facing what you've broken. Claire sat in her car outside the house, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Her reflection in the window didn't look like her anymore. Tired eyes, shaky breath, a heart full of guilt. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Inside, Daniel was waiting. The lights were still on, the air heavy. When she stepped in, he didn't yell. He just looked at her, calm, quiet, and heartbreakingly sad. "I found your messages," he said. "I didn't want to believe it." Her chest tightened. "Daniel, He raised a hand gently. "I'm not angry, Claire. I just want to know." Why? She couldn't find the words. How could she explain something she didn't even understand herself? She hadn't been searching for love, only to feel noticed, alive, seen again. Sometimes it's not betrayal that hurts most. It's realizing what pushed you there. Daniel sat down, staring at the floor. "I would have forgiven you," he whispered, "if you'd told me you were lonely." Tears streamed down her face. "I never meant for this to happen." He looked up, his eyes full of quiet pain. "But it did, and now we can't go back." The silence that followed was louder than any argument could have been. She reached for him, but he stepped back, not in anger, in heartbreak. "I still love you," he said softly. "But love isn't enough if you've already left me in your heart." Claire wanted to scream, to beg for another chance, but he turned away, walking upstairs without another word. His footsteps faded, leaving her in a house that suddenly felt like a stranger's. What do you do when the person you hurt still loves you, but can't look at you the same? Days passed like shadows. Ethan called, texted, tried to explain, but she never answered. It wasn't his fault alone. It wasn't anyone's. It was the slow erosion of something once strong. 1,000 quiet moments that went unlived, unspoken, unfelt. One evening, she walked past the same cafe where it all began. The golden lights glowed softly through the window. Just like that first night, Ethan was inside, sitting alone, staring into his coffee. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. Neither moved. Then Claire smiled faintly, sad, tired, but stronger. She didn't walk in. She just turned and kept walking, because she finally understood. Ethan wasn't her escape. He was a mirror, a reflection of everything she'd lost inside herself. The wind carried the faint sound of rain as she whispered, "I went too far." Not with him, but with forgetting who I was. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and walked into the night, uncertain, but free. Then, as she reached her car, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Can we talk?" Her hand froze midair. Her heart raced. And in that single moment, she realized the story wasn't over, just changing direction.